be taken back home to Africa. And our sister Omesham, Noelle, is going to speak about the learning and performance of gender and implication for students, education, and after-school choices. And I believe this is a study about public secondary schools in Nigeria. Yes. So we are glad to go back home.
Hello, good morning everyone. I'm Noelle, Omesham, Oputa, and like he said, I'm taking you back home. So my research, this is, I would say, 10 minutes obviously is not enough to speak about my research, but I'll try to highlight some of the issues I'd like to talk about. So my research is, I wanted to tell a story, but I know that if I start with my story, that will be my whole presentation, so I'll just cut it short. The whole essence of my research, or why I'm doing this research, was to answer a question. From my own personal experience of schooling, I couldn't really understand the relevance of education, especially going to a public secondary school in Nigeria, which is a state established institution. So I faced issues with bullying. I didn't really understand what exactly I was gaining from education. I faced issues with distant relation with my teachers. So schooling for me didn't really come with a good memory, sort of. So then when I started to hear about, obviously, the push for access to education, girl-child education, the question was not about just putting children in school, but what kind of education do they receive? What are their experiences of schooling? So my research is just to highlight that what we should be talking about is also not just putting people in school, but beyond access to education, what happens? And so, yes, thank God I'm gone with the story part. So the whole essence, my research aim was to look at gender and school choices. Now, what do I mean by gender for me? Gender for me is socio-cultural interpretations of what it means to be a man and a woman. It can also be religious as well. And then what I was trying to look at is how does this affect student choices in schools? For example, I had the issue of what it means to be a man in terms of masculinity and femininity. Now, in most parts of Nigeria, okay, let me go through the context of my research. My research was in the north central part of Nigeria, and it was ethnographic, which meant that I had to be in the school, try to understand the processes in the school. So I was there as both a researcher and a teacher in the school. And then I had interviews, observations, I had what I called masculinity and femininity exercises, which was just a piece of paper that I gave to the students to write it, to give short notes or phrases of what they meant, what they felt it meant to be a man or a woman. Now, for most research participants, what it means to be a man was in terms of what does a man do. So they define masculinity in terms of roles. So being a real man is someone who could provide. Being a real man is someone who could be a father, who could be a protector. So these were some of the dominant definitions of masculinity. Now, being a woman, on the contrast, the basic ideal of femininity was being a homemaker. So even if you are educated and you are expected to have a job outside the home, the first ideal of femininity was being able to take care of a home, being able to take care of children, sort of. And this affected the choices that girls felt that they had in schools. So now we had a push. Girls are in schools, they believe that they should be educated. But then again, they try to, they try to negotiate the choices they have that gives them enough allowance to also be a homemaker. So from my next slide, for example, we have a girl. I had a lot of discussions with female students, and then I would ask them, so what do you want to be, what do you aspire to be after school? And one of them would say, I would like to be a medical doctor, but I heard that it wouldn't give me enough time to take care of my home as a homemaker. So I would probably be a teacher. I can teach science, I would have more time for my family, and I would also, at least, I'm doing something. So this means that their choices have been limited based on the construction of what it means to be a real good woman. A lot of choices are not available to them because of this commitment to fulfill gender ideals. This also goes two ways for boys as well. So since masculinity is defined as being a provider most times, it means that they are looking for not just jobs that they're looking for career paths, not about what they are good at or what they enjoy, but jobs that will give them more money. for example. So if they see that I'm interested in being a computer scientist, for example, but since this is not, I'm not sure I'll get enough resources from that to take care of my family, I'd rather go into maybe something else that will give me more money. And this distorts the choices that also are available to boys in the school. So I've just given a small background of how ideals of femininity and masculinity affects the choices that students believe that they have in school. So it's just beyond putting children in schools. Now, let me go into the main arguments about what roles the school play in this. So we have a lot of people say schools empower, obviously economic empowerment. When you're educated, you have better chances for jobs. But then again, schools can also reinforce certain gender norms and stereotypes, which can also restrict the choices that students have and then reduce the chances of them benefiting from the benefits of education, if I may say that. So what I have here is my gendered findings in the school. So obviously, if we're looking at a lot of policies now about putting girls in schools, I would say that from my research context, that was ticked. So yes, we had more girls in schools, and it's interesting because this is not in an urban community, it was in a rural community. So now we are seeing that there's this push for education, not just by NGOs and the government, but people themselves see education as something prestigious for girls, for example. So there was gender parity, very high enrollment of girls in school, high attendance rate, we had high performance of girls in school, but that's not all. Despite this, we still had something that I call levels of gender stereotypes. Now, obviously, it's been written in a lot of places how there's this gendered education where sciences are regarded as a male domain and then arts are regarded as a female domain. Now, this was not the case in my research. In my research, there were actually more girls in science classes than boys. But that is not where the story ends. If I only looked at that finding, it might seem like we had progress in whatever ideals we are trying to achieve. But then girls, even if they were in science courses, there was another, obviously technology courses, they believed that they couldn't do it. So this was based on should I say, internalization of difference in genders, and which they saw was biological. So because boys are good in technology, I as a girl believe that I cannot do it. And when I asked them, where do you get these perceptions from, they can't answer. So this also affected the choices that they had in school. And then obviously, we also had certain school subjects that were reinforcing genders and stereotypical norms about being a homemaker. We had home economics, a lot of girls to be found there. Why? Because it is relevant for their future roles as homemakers. And then boys, because masculinity most times is defined in opposition to femininity. Very few boys have been obviously cooking classes because they believe that they'll have wives who will cook for them. So that there was no need for them to be in those classes. And then, apart from just looking at girls, I was also interested in the experience of education for boys as well. And something I really found out from my research was what called co-masculinity. So not being interested in schoolwork was seen as cool for boys. And that really affected their performance in school. But again, this was also influenced by how teachers saw them. Teachers already constructed boys as the problem. So when I go to the school, the first thing I heard was, oh, don't talk to boys, this is how they are. But this is not how they are. This is grouping them in a category and stripping them of their individualism. And a lot of boys complained to me about it. They said, this is not how I am, but this is how teachers see me. So I might as well just act the way they say I am. So this really affected the abilities of boys to learn in school as well. And then next, in terms of relations in the school, I saw that there were a lot of intimidation of girls, and
I think part of that intimidation is the fact that you have 1 minute.
Okay, I'll just go through everything. So yes, there were a lot of violence, a lot of things I cannot talk about now, and yeah. So all within my whole research, if I'm trying to ask a question, my question is, it's not just about putting children in school, but what kind of education do they receive, and how do cultural norms and definitions restrict their choices. I didn't talk about religious commitments as well, because that was a huge part in my research. I've seen that religious commitments to certain ideals of gender can also restrict choices children have. And sorry, if I may put this into the context of what we are talking about violence, I would say that schools play a very huge part in, should I say, the masculinization process in schools also aid in this definition of boys as being violent. For example, in my school, in the school where I did my research, you know, there was this ideology that boys should not be protected. So they protected the girls, they kept them in secure places, but boys had to fend for themselves. And a lot of ways they did this was through having violent weapons, knives, and just to, so a part of being a boy was mixed with being able to protect yourself, and then that's also started the use of violence. We can also add that to this discussion as well. And then obviously religious commitment. So that's just a summary. There's a lot I haven't said here. If you want to hear more, I can talk to you after my session. Thank you very much.